doubt. Not necessarily just doubt as to whether the crime has taken place or not. But doubt also means extenuating circumstances. This is a deeper meaning in the law of what shubha really means. Extenuating circumstances that may not establish the guilt in fullness as it would be in the cold-blooded, for example, deliberate murder of a person. Let's take a few examples of the common punishment. Some people would say Islam is barbaric because it calls for capital punishment. But if you look at it carefully, capital punishment, for example, for the murderer. If Islam is barbaric in that, what explained the fact that until recent decades, capital punishment was very common in the so-called advanced and civilized world? Today, even after in Canada and the United States, I don't know about Britain, there have been, of course, removal or rescinding of the capital punishment. We find that it has been reinstated already. In several states now, in the United States, capital punishment has been reinstated. In opinion polls in both Canada and the United States, there appear to be a large segment of that civilized and decent society who support that capital punishment should be reinstated, at least in some cases of deliberate cold-blooded type of murder. And I'm sure in Britain, there will be a lot of people also who favor that to put some stop to crime. So why is it only barbaric in the case of Islam? You see, this is sometimes a problem of double standard that we might fall into without really being aware of what we're really attributing to Islam. In fact, there is something about capital punishment in Islam that does not exist in any modern liberal law that I know of. That there is a possibility for rehabilitation and forgiveness. In Islamic law, the family of the deceased or the murdered person may, if they feel that this would rectify the situation, may forgive the murderer for a ransom or without even a ransom. And this is something even unique that focus more not on chopping heads but more on rehabilitation in case there is signs of remorse and the family accept to give up the right on this issue. Take the other issue of adultery, for example. There is a big mistake, again, that some people mix between adultery and fornication. And these have two different punishments in Islam. Fornication, that is by someone who has not been married, the punishment is not capital punishment. Capital punishment in the case of adultery is only for a married person who has been married. And if one party has not been married, then he takes his punishment. There is no generalization. You take the lesser of the two punishments. But look at the conditions, even though it sounds very horrible type of punishment. Aside from defending it on the basis of being a moral statement of society, of its position vis-a-vis this very destructive element that destroy families and the fabric of society. You can talk about it rhetorically. But look at it legally, even. You cannot implement that punishment unless you have 4 witnesses who report without hesitation and without changing their minds that they have seen everything in graphic forms. I do not wish to go in greater detail, but if you read in the books of Islamic law how they describe exact citing of everything, not behind any cover or any doubt, 4 witnesses, and all of them agree to give witness, knowing that the punishment could be a capital punishment. For someone to commit that act of indecency in such a way that he's seen, of course, by more than 4, because not everybody who would see things will report it anyway, or would be willing to give a witness. It means that a person is behaving worse than animals. Worse than animals. Animals are created like that. But for someone to do something like that in public and already is married, it's something that is very horrible that no civilized society, regardless of the nature of the moral standard they accept, can tolerate or accept. In my humble understanding, and I stand corrected, there have been no single incident that I know of where that law has been implemented in the 1400 years of the history of Islam on the basis of 4 witnesses. Name one. I'm not aware. It could be deficiency of my knowledge. I have never seen or read any single case that met all these conditions. The only cases that happened are for people who came and confessed to the Prophet. And even when they came to confess, 1 or 2 cases, it says that the Prophet turned his face away from them. Somebody say, "Oh Prophet of Allah, I am married, I committed adultery, I want to be purified." The Prophet turned his face away, giving a signal. If you have done something wrong, go and repent to Allah. Then a man came to him one time and kept insisting. When the Prophet turned, he came back in his face and said, "I committed that." He said, "Well, maybe you just looked." He said, "No, I didn't look." It's much more than that. He said, maybe you kissed. No, no, it's more than that. The Prophet is giving him all opportunity. He said, all right, maybe you just touched. No, no. Maybe you just hugged. No. And he kept giving him all kind of avenues. The man insisted, and the Prophet had no alternative but to say, all right, apply the penalty to him, or else the law would be a joke in that case. But the spirit of it shows really that it is more of a statement of the spiritual and moral standard in society than is it for interest of killing people. And the Prophet himself would have loved if that person bugged off, repented, and purified himself in his life, which would not be different from the attitude of many other people following other similar type of religious faith. Take the issue of cutting hands, barbaric. Mutilation of people simply because some poor person felt hungry and stole. To begin with, the conditions are almost impossible also to truly implement the penalty of cutting the hand. It's almost impossible. Some people could abuse it. Some Muslim rulers may abuse it, but that's not Islam. Look at the conditions in Islamic law. First of all, you cannot punish this severe punishment because of petty theft. Petty theft. You have to evaluate the value depending, of course, on the cost of living and so on. But petty theft is not punishable in that extreme form. Number two, again, you have to have the full certainty that this theft has taken place. But more importantly is the concept I mentioned earlier of shubha, that it is not only doubt as to whether something happened or not, but any extenuating circumstances. For example, before Islam say cut the hand of the thief, it said achieve social justice in order to remove the reason why people steal. It says that if the person steals because of psychological problem, psychiatric problem, he cannot be punished. That's shubha. It's not the same. That's not what it's intended for. And let me give you one example of the clear understanding, clear-minded understanding of Islam in the mind of a great Muslim who happened to be the second caliph after Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, a great statesman, Umar. One time, somebody brought his servants to him, and he said they committed theft. He asked them, did you steal? They said yes. Any person with any background in law says the confession is the master of evidence. They confessed. But he did not rush. He said, why did you steal? They said, our master doesn't look after us. He doesn't feed us properly or clothe us. He pushed us into this. And Umar looked at the man and he said, take them back. And next time, if they steal, I will cut your hand, not theirs. In another occasion, there was a famine in Medina. And Umar did not cut any hand, did not order the cutting of any hand. Some people mistakenly, even some Muslims mistakenly said Umar stopped the application of the law of theft. Umar did not stop it. Umar applied the law of theft in Islam, or punishment for theft, in its appropriate way, which means you don't punish when people are hungry. That is the nature in the spirit of the law. And if it sounds very horrible, even as a statement of moral teaching, I remember reading one time a scholar who said that in a survey that he made for almost 350 years of Islamic rule, 7 hands were cut. Now it sounds very offensive that a hand would be cut every 50 years. And I'm sure even if Islamic law has been adhered to more strictly, no hand could have been cut even. 1 hand cut every 50 years, And now we don't get offended that in North America, in a single city like Detroit or Chicago or New York, there might be scores of people killed while being mugged by thieves. But again, one case is barbaric because 1 hand is cut in 50 years. But the constant murder every night of scores of people does not offend our sensibility and sense of civilization. I could go on and on, but I hope that this example might suffice to indicate that this myth about the barbaric Islamic law that is interested in chopping hands and cutting heads is not necessarily true. Finally, last but not least, the issue of women in Islam. I expect a lot of questions to arise, but let me just provoke you. Just give us a sort of very brief summary of where Islam stands on this. And I let you be the judge as to whether the notion of women being a less being in Islam is truth, is fact, or myth. First of all, on the spiritual level, you find that nowhere in the entire Quran was there a single instance where the finger was pointed to Eve as the reason for the fall of man or temptation to eat from the